Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Nath. I'm Director of Innovation for the City and County of San Francisco. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about how the open source community can teach us about how to innovate in government. So we're going to look at some of the principles within the open source community and apply them to government. So a lot of the examples, of course, are coming here from San Francisco. I know them best. And we are unique in many ways. There are other cities across the country that are innovating. I think New York City's doing a great job, Boston's doing a great job, and there's a few other emerging cities. But I'd like to think we're in the forefront as well. We all know that open source has been wildly popular and successful in many areas. It powers the internet, truly. If you look at Apache, if you look at Linux, WordPress, Android, the list goes on. And I think that power really comes from a few different key aspects that I'm going to share with you right now. If you look at government, it is very hierarchical. It's structured, and the boundaries and the lines between the top and the bottom are very well defined, and the communication between the top and the bottom are not as well as it could be. If you look at open source, it's more peer-to-peer. It's less hierarchical, and the boundaries are more fluid. And what we're trying to do in government is actually take a little bit from open source. I'm not naive to think that we can actually apply the open source model fully to government, but it would be great if we could actually make the edges a little bit softer and make it a little bit more porous so that folks like yourself can actually participate and innovate in government. When you think about government, it's really closed. Both physically and access to people, you really can't get into government. There's just a few channels for you to interact with government. And if you look at open source, everything's out in the open. The code is there for you to use, all the artifacts, everything is there to actually look at. And that kind of radical transparency is something that is something that the public deserves. And beyond just that right, it's a way for all of you to participate in creating a better government and a better community. So the question is, what are those architectures of participation? What does that look like? And there's different ways for us to start making government more open and more inclusive and thinking about how to collaborate with our community. One of the things that has really worked well from a government perspective is sharing data. And I'll share with you some stories about data and why it's important. And you might think, well, what kind of government data would I really care about? And how that's changed from what you think about transparency. When you think about transparency, you think about FOIA requests, PDFs, documents like that. That's not really that interesting to me. I think that's important. But really, I think the innovation is when we're sharing raw machine readable data. And that's important so that the innovators, the technologists, journalists, artists can actually use that information in meaningful ways and look at just a whole bunch of creativity that you're about to see. So I'm going to share with you a story about GPS. So in 1973, the Department of Defense launched satellites to create GPS, and it was for military use. And it wasn't until former President Ronald Reagan in 1983 actually made it available to the public. And he did that because of a great tragedy. A career in airlines flew accidentally into Russian airspace because they didn't know exactly where the boundaries were. And because of that, they were shot down. Over 200 people were killed. And so he made the right decision to make this publicly available. And because of that, we all know the great benefits of GPS. We're using that in many ways. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And you can think about the same thing about weather data. It's just something we take for granted. So there's a lot of value locked up in government. And really, we're just stewards of that data. This is public data. This is your data. You pay for it as taxpayers. Now, fast forward to President Obama. In his first day in office, he chose to write a memo. He could have written anything, about anything. And he chose to talk about openness and transparency and the power of working with our community. And that's really profound. He could have made any statement, but that was the one he wanted to project to the world. And because of that leadership that he's taken around openness, this initiative called data.gov started up. And this is really a repository of government data, federal data, and it's hundreds of thousands of data sets. And it's things like farmers market information, health information, a lot of different types of information. And we're taking a local spin on that. We were really inspired by that, and we started DataSF about 3 months later, in August of 2009. And we did that with no cost. We use open source technology. We just put it out there, recognizing that this is a beta, and we're going to iterate on that. And if you think about local data, it's often much more interesting. It's community data. It's things like crime. It's things like, where are all the potholes? How are people voting? Where is street parking? A lot of interesting data is happening locally, and we're starting to share that. We have nearly 200 data sets and over 60 applications that have been developed on top of this data. I'm going to go through a few of these applications. One is called How SF Votes. This is taking a look at voting patterns in San Francisco and mashing that up with economic data, with census data, so you can look at how people are voting based on their socioeconomic class, their home ownership rates, a whole bunch of different ways, and it makes it really, really visual and really easy to consume that data. Another example is 3-in-1 information. So 3-in-1, for those of you who haven't used that service, and you should use it, you pay for it as residents here in San Francisco, it's all about non-emergency services. And it's an expensive channel. It's about $2 for every phone call you make for when the next bus is coming. But anyways, they collect a lot of data, millions and millions of records. And we've been able to visualize that by just sharing that data. So one of the Microsoft partners actually made this, and it's freely available to any of the citizens, and we didn't pay a dime for that. And what's interesting is when I asked Microsoft about 2 years ago to make the same exact thing, they came back with a bill for about $500,000. And here we're able to do that for free without any effort. How many of you actually are using an app like this in your pockets today? OK. So for a lot of people, taking transportation is something that's really, really important in their life. And knowing when that next bus is coming is critical for them so that they can plan their lives, they can grab that cup of coffee, or plan their day around. And we, as a city, have released that data. We have GPS information on all our buses, and we are streaming that real time. We have prediction information that we're putting out there as well. And because of that, you've seen dozens of applications that have been created. Some of these applications are great, some are not so great. And what's interesting is now there's a marketplace. There's innovation happening because you have market forces creating better and better applications. So I'm sure that 5, 10 years from now, we're going to even see better applications happening. Many of you know about SF Park. It's a $25 million federally funded initiative. It's about getting real-time inventory data about our parking here in San Francisco out to the public. I started talking to them about 2 years ago and asking them, hey, don't just create an iPhone app and let Oracle do it. I'm sure they'd do a great job. Why not release that data and let other people innovate on top of it? And that's exactly what they've done. And you're now seeing real-time streaming data for people to actually use from an academic sense, from an application standpoint, artistic. It's just amazing the kind of creativity that we're seeing from our community. Last example that I'm going to give around this area is community data. Trees are an asset. San Francisco is spending a lot of investment, and with our partners like Friends of the Urban Forest, to create really an urban forest around here. And obviously, we can't catalog all the trees out here by ourselves. It's a very expensive proposition. So a nonprofit created this application so that people could crowdsource and help manage the inventory of trees. And that information goes back into government. So it's a two-way kind of interaction. All the other examples are just consuming data and presenting it to our consumers. I'm going to talk a little bit about another example. It's called Open 3-in-1 API. It's a ReadWrite API. And that may sound trivial with Twitter and Facebook and everyone else doing ReadWrite APIs, but for government, that's actually a really profound step. You can't imagine how much security questions I had to face to try to get this out here. They were saying, really, you want people to actually go into our systems and write to our databases? Are you crazy? That's exactly what we don't want people doing. And this idea started in June of 2009 when we launched Twitter and SF3-in-1, and we were one of the first cities to do that. And we recognized that, hey, this is a great start. It's a great new channel for people to use, but it's unstructured information. We have to take this information and re-enter it into our systems. Really inefficient. Well, why not have it more automated, where it actually goes to the people who actually do the work? So in March of 2010, with, I guess now almost former CIO White House, he's leaving, it sounds like, going to Harvard, and our former mayor, and Tim O'Reilly, we announced Open 3-in-1 API. And this API was not just for San Francisco. We worked with all these other cities to create a standard communication protocol. And that's really, really important. As a developer or as an artist, you can take that information and it'll work in San Francisco, it'll work in DC, it'll work in Boston. And it's recognizing that the challenges that we have here in San Francisco are not unique. As taxpayers, we're paying for solutions that should work in other cities. And so where are we today? We've got a huge number of applications that are emerging. One that I want to talk about is Blockboard. They're here in the Mission. They're launching. They've launched. And it's a great application that's connecting community. It's a virtual bulletin board. And they're also using Open 3-in-1 for residents to actually submit requests and issues to the city. And like I said, it goes directly to the people who need to do the work, bypassing the call center, saving money, and increasing efficiency. So how did we get there? Well, we recognize that standards are truly, truly important. If you look at a lot of the innovation that's happened, it's around standards. HTTP, look at written language. From that, people are able to do things that you couldn't have imagined before. And it's taking those combinations and letting the community create something new and wonderful that's really powerful. We also recognize that we have limited capacity. There's 4 people in my group, and I have no budget. And there's not much I can do, right? So why not work with our larger community? Why not work with a global tech community? And so that's, again, talking about openness, creating that culture of openness so that people can participate and create things. We also recognize that we need to collaborate. I know that I don't have the best answers. The actual answers are coming from our community. And so a lot of the work that we do is coming from our community. I'm just coming from an event I'm hosting called City Camp. It's an unconference where people are generating ideas about how to create social and civic value. And in this example, we're working with nonprofits, we're working with academia, we're working with other cities. We're really agnostic, and that's the way we should be. Great ideas should come from anywhere, and we should be able to incorporate that back into government. And I think that's really powerful, and I think goes back to the theme here, and it's something that I hope to advance in San Francisco, is this idea about collaboration and working with all of you and the rest of the world and making San Francisco a better place to live. Thank you.